booty on that thought he made me spring it, spring, spring. Then I took her to my pad, made her sing it, sing, sing. First she asked me for a fling, now she cling it, cling, cling. And she's bossy, but she threw it. Oh, you hella saucy, did you stew it? Wonder what it cost me. I threw some shoes in, ice be on my body. I'm never bruising. Hey, yeah, 4 flights, 1 month. Bitch, I'm from the future. Catch this baby going beast mode. She hit me with the nudie. Weapon nail class, find me triple stepping on my scooty. Suck your half mask, cause you know your mommy is my tutor. I'm a tall man, why she tryna get me tall, man? Rubber band, man, can you toss it off? Let the rain, man. Rain dance, taking another L with a goofy thought. No chance, love, getting money, call it romance. Hey, sussy boys, are you hungry? I see you tryna buy my sound, but it sounded kinda funky. And them dollars made my spidey sense a ring, ring. And that booty on that thought he made me spring it, spring, spring. Then I took her to my pad, made her sing it, sing, sing. First she asked me for a fling, now she cling it, cling, cling. And she's bossy, but she threw it. Oh, you hella saucy, did you stew it? Wonder what it cost me. I threw some shoes in, ice be on my body. I'm never bruising, hey. Hey, let me break it down. I got a bad bitch tryna jump my bones in a booty round. Hey, you see my whips on fleek, yeah. Pink flames, pink Fiat, baby is a treat. Yeah, of course I'm eating all my cells cause they stuff with greens. Yeah, this baby's got the German coochie, really made me scream. So I'ma just tour the world and grab a bag, I'm really keen. Yeah, I'm really on that goofy shit, but ain't no Charlie Sheen. Hey, sussy boys, are you hungry? I see you tryna buy my sound, but it sounded kinda funky. And them dollars made my spidey sense a ring, ring. And that booty on that thought he made me spring it, spring, spring. Then I took her to my pad, made her sing it, sing, sing. First she asked me for a fling, now she cling it, cling, cling. Then she's bossy, but she threw it. Oh, you hella saucy, did you stew it? Wonder what it cost me. I threw some shoes in, ice be on my body. I'm never bruising, hey.
Baby, no money.
You're probably hoping your local bar is open, 'cause I don't go there anymore. Long lost friend, said he just a friend, ain't just a friend anymore. That's the way these things start. And I wanted to stay, but you sent me away.
Hello, 'tis me. I'm here. I wasn't gonna wear my headphones, but I'm just gonna put them on for right now. Hello. I was curious as to what you guys were listening to because I can't tell what music I'm playing right now. Hello. Hold on. I'm taking them off. The music's too loud. In order for me to do audio stuff that makes sense, I have to do stuff that doesn't auditorily make sense on my end. But hello. Hi. Nice to see y'all again. As you can see, I'm reading this time around. I say that like every third stream I do isn't a reading stream, but like it's not a bit. I don't pretend that I like reading for the bit. I sincerely, like, I had a day off last week and I read 2 books in a row, just in one day, front to back. So I don't know what I was trying to prove there. I'm using books to hold up my laptop. I also don't know what that's meant to prove. Anyway, yeah, I haven't live streamed in like 2 weeks. My bad on that. But I don't know. I've come up with a couple goals for myself as far as streaming goes. I think that 2 weeks between streams is too long. So hopefully I'm going to try to stick with it this summer, and I'm going to try to stick with it throughout the school year, but we'll see depending on how things go for me. But I'm hoping to stream at least once a week. At home, during the summer, when I have less stuff going on, this is definitely going to be an achievable goal. But during school, I don't know what my job situation might be, and I'm going to have a roommate, which is something I didn't have to worry about last year. So I'm going to have to talk with my roommates, and I have a social life, believe it or not. I know. But yeah, I'm just gonna have to try to balance all that and make it all make sense. Also, speaking of balancing things, my computer, as I mentioned, is like precariously balanced on my D&D books right now, and I'm worried to move my computer too much in case it falls. So yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen. Hold on one second, I'm having issues. Okay, yeah, this is good. But alrighty. I've also decided, and I don't know how long this is gonna take, but I've decided that once I reach 200 followers, I'll make a Discord, because I'm not sure about having a Discord, especially when I'm smaller. It doesn't really seem that worthwhile, but I can't argue with what my brain has decided are the facts. Discord's just a really good way of letting people know when you go live. So yeah. And I know that reading streams aren't necessarily everybody's favorite, but I really like doing them. And 20,000 is one of my favorite books, and whenever I want to read it, it means it's time for me to stream it again. And if you're interested in the book, but you don't want to start at chapter 21, which is where we're starting today, I have all of the VODs, videos on demand, of me reading it, the past live streams, on my YouTube, which is, as you can see down there, Cam Gala VODs. Alrighty. I think we're ready to get into it. So we're gonna have to do a little bit of a vibe change with the music. Give me 1 second. There. Some chill piano. I really like this. I've debated trying to play other things, but I just really like chill piano. Also, this is earlier than I normally go, but yeah, just a quick recap of what I said earlier on in the stream. I'm going to try to stream with some consistency going forward. Oh, hello, Neptune. Nice to see you. Sorry I haven't been talking to people very much lately. I'm alive. My excuse is going to be that my twin sister is in the Air Force right now, and I'm sad, so I haven't been showing my face on the internet. But I am here. And yes, as I said earlier, I'm going to try to stream at least once a week. It is something I enjoy, and I came up with a bunch of ideas for it earlier. Some of them are stupid, but you know, don't even worry about it. Well, I do worry about it, because I love my friends. But thank you for stopping by. I'm going to start reading now. Hello, Chloe. Oh my gosh, it's been so long. I know that I just said your name, but I have been meaning to ask. Should I just call you Toaster? Oh my god, wait, did the live notification just go out or something? Because I'm noticing people starting to talk. Hi guys. Whenever I stream, I know that there are people watching, but I just get into the mindset that it's me sitting alone talking to my computer screen. So when people speak, I'm like, I understand. I got a quesadilla the other day and then my mother ate it. But I understand the want of quesadilla, which is why I ordered one. Good for you. Figure out the house thing. Don't worry about it. Again, this is one of those streams where if you haven't been able to catch the other ones, then I'm not sure how much people will enjoy it, but I enjoy it, and that's what's important. It's for me. Also, I've been, you know how I generally drink tea when I live stream? I was waiting all day to make this tea because I wanted to show it on stream. Or not show it, it doesn't look interesting, but this is my mother's mug that I borrowed without her permission. And in it is some chai latte. My mom bought me K-Cups from Walmart that have chai latte in them, and I'm so happy because I like chai latte things. Send me a quesadilla, thank you. I literally now, the two things that I have to my name that aren't just normal coffee and then gifts, things that I've bought in terms of teas, is chai latte that my mom got me, so I'll have to go to Starbucks, and also literally Starbucks green tea that my mom bought me, or she didn't buy me, I bought it, but you know what I'm saying. I bought these things so I don't have to go to Starbucks. still spending money, but considerably less. And I'm eating a whoopie pie. And if you're from a place that isn't like Pennsylvania or New England, you might not know what a whoopie pie is. I don't know what places have it, but this is she. Like cake and frosting and stuff. That is she. And I'm going to eat that. And I'm also have that I might crack open this chalky chip muffin. So yeah, we're living the high life here. We got chai lattes and we got 2 junk foods. And hi, Max. But yes, I am going to read. I'm very excited for it. Let me get started. I know it's a channel point redemption people can use, but I'm trying to keep good posture. Just on my own in general. Okay, I'm ready. Let's get into it. How am I looking? Did my face just light up? Yeah, it probably did. Okay. Here we go. We're almost done with part 1, y'all. And I've heard Amish people make good... What? My dad just talked to me, but I have no clue what he said. I've heard Amish people make good whoopie pies. I've seen them selling baked goods before. Okay. Just to give a preface for this chapter, Ned Land, Consul, and the main character, Professor Aronnax, asked Captain Nemo, captain of the Nautilus that they're on. I hope you know these things if you're this far in. But they asked him if they could go ashore and just like go on an island, like take a boat up to the land, because they've been underwater for a considerable amount of time. And to their surprise, he said yes. So they actually, in this chapter, get to go on the land. Chapter 21, Some Days Ashore. Stepping ashore had an exhilarating effect on me. Ned Land tested the soil with his foot, as if he were laying claim to it. Yet it had only been 2 months since we had become, as Captain Nemo expressed it, passengers on the Nautilus. In other words, the literal prisoners of its commander. In a few minutes, we were a gunshot away from the coast. The soil was almost entirely madreporic, but certain dry stream beds were sown with granite rubble, proving that this island was of primordial origin. The entire horizon was hidden behind a curtain of wonderful forests. Enormous trees, sometimes as high as 200 feet, were linked to each other by garlands of tropical creepers, genuine natural hammocks that swayed in a mild breeze. There were mimosas, banyan trees, beefwood, teakwood, hibiscus, screw pines, palm trees, all mingling in wild profusion. And beneath the shade of their green canopies, at the feet of their gigantic trunks, there grew orchids, leguminous plants, and ferns. Meanwhile, ignoring all these fine specimens of Papuan flora, the Canadian passed up the decorative in favor of the functional. He spotted a coconut palm, beat down some of its fruit, broke them open, and we drank their milk and ate their meat. Don't call that meat, oh gosh. Ate their meat with a pleasure that was a protest against our standard fare on the Nautilus. Excellent, Ned Land said. Exquisite, Consul replied. And I don't think, the Canadian said, that your Nemo would object to us stashing a cargo of coconuts aboard his vessel. I imagine not, I replied, but he won't want to sample them. Too bad for him, Consul said. And plenty good for us, Ned Land shot back. There'll be more left over. A word of caution, Mr. Land, I told the harpooner who was about to ravage another coconut palm. Coconuts are admirable things, but before we stuff the skiff with them, it would be wise to find out whether this island offers other substances just as useful. Some fresh vegetables would be well received in the Nautilus's pantry. I just hit myself in the eye with the spoon. It's fine. The master is right, Consul replied, and I propose that we set aside 3 places in our longboat, one for fruit, other for vegetables, and a third for venison, of which I still haven't glimpsed the tiniest specimen. Don't give up so easily, Council, the Canadian replied. So let's continue our excursion, I went on, but keep a sharp lookout. This island seems uninhabited, but it might still harbor certain individuals who aren't so finicky about the sort of game they eat. Damn. Hee hee, Ned put in with a meaningful movement of his jaws. Ned, oh horrors, Council exclaimed. Ye gods, Canadian shot back. I'm starting to appreciate the charms of cannibalism. Ned, don't say that, Council answered. You a cannibal? Why, I'll no longer be safe next to you, I who share your cabin. Does this mean I'll wake up half-devoured one fine day? I'm awfully fond of you, Council, my friend, but not enough to eat you when there's better food around. Did Ned Land just say, I'm fond of you, but not fond enough to eat you? Okay. I mean, yeah, everyone knows the more fond you are of someone, the more willing you are to eat them. Ah. Chewing break. Yummy. Then I daren't delay, Council replied. The hunt is on. We absolutely must bag some game to placate this man-eater, or one of these mornings Master won't find enough pieces of his servant to serve him. While exchanging this chit-chat, we entered beneath the dark canopies of the forest, and for 2 hours we explored it in every direction. We couldn't have been luckier in our search for edible vegetation, and some of the most useful produce in the tropical zone supplied us with a valuable foodstuff missing on board. I mean the breadfruit tree, which is quite abundant in the Guibora Island, and there I chiefly noted the seedless variety that in Malaysia is called rima. This tree is distinguished from other trees by a straight trunk 40 feet high. To the naturalist's eye, its gracefully rounded crown, formed of big multi-lobed leaves, was enough to denote the artocarpus that has been so successfully transplanted to the Mascarene Islands east of Madagascar. From its mass of greenery, huge globular fruit stood out. Yep, I thought I read that wrong, but I didn't. From its mass of greenery, huge globular fruit stood out, a decimeter wide and furnished on the outside with creases that assumed a hexangular pattern. It's a handy plant that nature gives to regions lacking in wheat. Without needing to be cultivated, it bears fruit 8 months out of the year. Ned Land was on familiar terms with this fruit. He had already eaten it on his many voyages and knew how to cook its edible substance. So the very sight of it aroused his appetite, and he couldn't control himself. Sir, he told me, I'll die if I don't sample a little breadfruit pasta. Sample some, Ned, my friend. Sample all you like. We're here to conduct experiments. Let's conduct them. It won't take a minute, the Canadian replied. Equipped with a magnifying glass, he lit a fire of deadwood that was soon crackling merrily. Meanwhile, Council and I selected the finest artocarpus fruit. Some still weren't ripe enough, and their thick skins covered in white, slightly fibrous pulps, but a great many others were yellowish and gelatinous, just begging to be picked. This fruit contained no pits. Council brought a dozen of them to Ned Land, who cut them into thick slices and placed them over a fire of live coals, all the while repeating, "You'll see, sir, how tasty this bread is." Especially since we've gone without baked goods for so long, Council said. It's more than just bread, the Canadian added. It's a dainty pastry. You've never eaten any, sir? No, Ned. All right, get ready for something downright delectable. If you don't come back for seconds, I'm no longer the king of harpooners. Y'all, this isn't bread. This is definitely just fruit that they're cooking up, but does anyone know what breadfruit is? Is that a real thing? Someone get back to me. I'll keep reading. After a few minutes, the parts of the fruit exposed to the fire were completely toasted. On the inside, there appeared some white pasta, a sort of soft bread center whose flavor reminded me of artichoke. This bread was excellent, I must admit, and I ate it with great pleasure. Unfortunately, I said, this pasta won't stay fresh, so it seems pointless to make a supply for on board. By thunder, sir, Ned Land exclaimed. There you go, talking like a naturalist, but meantime I'll be acting like a baker. Council, harvest some of this fruit to take with us when we go back. And how will you prepare it? I asked the Canadian. I'll make a fermented batter from its pulp that'll keep indefinitely without spoiling. When I want some, I'll just cook it in the galley on board. It'll have a slightly tart flavor, but you'll find it excellent. So, Mr. Ned, I see that this bread is all we need. Not quite, Professor, the Canadian replied. We need some fruit to go with it, or at least some vegetables. Then let's look for fruit and vegetables. When our breadfruit harvesting was done, we took to the trail to complete this dry land dinner. We didn't search in vain, and near noontime we had an ample supply of bananas. This delicious produce from the torrid zones ripens all year round, and Malaysians, who gave them the name pisang, eat them without bothering to cook them. Well, who cook? Sorry, I know this book was written in the 1800s, but I literally was just like, wait, who cooks? I don't regularly cook bananas before I eat them. Anyway, in addition to bananas, we gathered some enormous jackfruit with a very tangy flavor, some tasty mangoes, and some pineapples of unbelievable size. But this foraging took up a good deal of our time, which, even so, we had no cause to regret. Council kept Ned under observation. The harpooner walked in the lead, and during his stroll through this forest he gathered with sure hands some excellent fruit that should have completed his provisions. So, Council asked, you have everything you need, Ned, my friend? The Canadian put in. What? You're complaining? All this vegetation doesn't make a meal, Ned replied. Just side dishes, dessert. But where's the soup course? Where's the roast? Right, I said. Ned promised us cutlets, which seems highly questionable to me. Sir, the Canadian replied, our hunting not only isn't over, it hasn't even started. Patience, we're sure to end up bumping into some animal with either feathers or fur, and if not in this locality, then in another. And if not today, then tomorrow, because we mustn't wander too far off, Council added. That's why I propose that we return to the skiff. What, already? Ned exclaimed. We ought to be back before nightfall, I said. But what hour is it then? The Canadian asked. 2 o'clock at least, Council replied. Oh, how time flies on solid ground, exclaimed Mr. Ned Land with a sigh of regret. Off we go, Council replied. This was written so insane. Hold on, we're taking a break. To sip. Yummy. So we returned through the forest, and we completed our harvest by making a clean sweep of some palm cabbages that had to be picked from the crowns of their trees, some small beans that I recognized as the brow of the Malaysians, and some high-quality yams. Sorry. Just gonna have a bite. Yummy. Okay. We were overlooked when we arrived at the skiff. However, Ned Land still found these provisions inadequate. We were overloaded, not overlooked. I just realized I skipped a... No, I didn't. I'm having a moment. We were overloaded when we arrived at the skiff. However, Ned Land still found these provisions inadequate. But fortune smiled on him. Just as we were boarding, he spotted several trees 25 to 30 feet high, belonging to the palm species. As valuable as the Arctocarpus, these trees are justly ranked among the most useful produce in Malaysia. They were sago palms, vegetation that grows without being cultivated. Like mulberry trees, they reproduce by means of shoots and seeds. Ned Land knew how to handle these trees. Taking his axe and wielding it with great vigor, he soon stretched out on the ground 2 or 3 sago palms, whose maturity was revealed by the white dust sprinkled over their palm fronds. I watched him more as a naturalist than as a man in hunger. He began by removing from each trunk an inch-thick strip of bark that covered a network of long, hopelessly tangled fibers that were puttied with a sort of gummy flour. The flour was the starch-like sago, an edible substance chiefly consumed by the Melanesian peoples. For the time being, Ned Land was content to chop these trunks into pieces, as if he were making firewood. Later, he would extract the flour by sifting it through cloth to separate it from its fibrous ligaments, let it dry out in the sun, and leave it to harden inside molds. Finally, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, laden with our treasures, we left the island beach and a half hour later pulled alongside the Nautilus. Nobody appeared on our arrival. The enormous sheet iron cylinder seemed deserted. Our provisions loaded on board, I went below to my stateroom. There I found my supper ready. I ate it and then fell asleep. The next day, January 6th, nothing new on board. Not a sound inside, not a sign of life. The skiff stayed alongside in the same place we had left it. We decided to return to the Guebora Island. Ned hoped for better luck in his hunting than on the day before, and he wanted to visit a different part of the forest. By sunrise, we were off. Carried by an inbound current, the longboat reached the island in a matter of moments. We disembarked, and thinking it best to abide by the Canadian's instincts, we followed Ned Land, whose long legs threatened to outpace us. Ned went westward up the coast. Then, fording some stream beds, he reached an open plains that were bordered by wonderful forests. Some kingfishers lurked along the watercourses, but they didn't let us approach. Their cautious behavior proved to me that these winged creatures knew where they stood on bipeds of our species, and I concluded that if this island wasn't inhabited, at least human beings paid it frequent visits. After crossing a pretty lush prairie, we arrived on the outskirts of a small wood, enlivened by the singing and soaring of a large number of birds. Still, they're merely birds, Council said. But some are edible, the harpooner replied. Wrong, Ned, my friend, Council answered, because I only see ordinary parrots here. Council, my friend, Ned replied in all seriousness, parrots are like pheasant to people with nothing on their plates. And I might add, I said, that when these birds are properly cooked, they're at least worth a stab of the fork. Indeed, under the dense foliage of this wood, a whole host of parrots fluttered from branch to branch, needing only the proper upbringing to speak human dialects. At present, they were cackling in chorus with parakeets of every color, with solemn cockatoos that seemed to be pondering some philosophical problem, while bright red lories passed like pieces of bunting borne on the breeze. Damn, that was like alliteration right there. In the midst of callow parrots raucously on the wing, Papuan lories painted the subtlest shades of azure. Azure? I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce that. Blue, and a whole variety of delightful winged creatures, none terribly edible. However, one bird unique to these shores, which never passes beyond the boundaries of the Aru and Papuan Islands, was missing from this collection. But I was given a chance to marvel at it soon enough. After crossing through a moderately dense thicket, we again found some plains obstructed by bushes. There I saw some magnificent birds soaring aloft, the arrangement of their long feathers causing them to head into the wind. Their undulating flight, the grace of their aerial curves, and the play of their colors allured and delighted the eye. I had no trouble identifying them. "Birds of paradise!" I exclaimed. "Partridge family?" Ned Land asked. "I doubt it, Mr. Land. Nevertheless, I'm counting on your dexterity to catch me one of these delightful representatives of tropical nature. And I'll give it a try, Professor, but I'm handier with a harpoon than a rifle." Malaysians, who do a booming business in these birds with the Chinese, have various methods for catching them that we couldn't use. Sometimes they set snares on the tops of tall trees that the bird of paradise prefers to inhabit. At other times, they capture it with a tenacious glue that paralyzes its movements. They will even go so far as to poison the springs where these fowl habitually drink. But in our case, all we could do was fire at them on the wing, which left us little chance of getting one. And in truth, we used up a good part of our ammunition in vain. Near 11 o'clock in the morning, we cleared the lower slopes of the mountains that form the island's center, and we still hadn't bagged a thing. Hunger spurred us on. The hunters had counted on consuming the proceeds of their hunting, and they had miscalculated. Luckily, and to much his surprise, Council pulled off a right and left shot and ensured our breakfast. He brought down a white pigeon and a ringdove, which were briskly plucked, hung from a spit, and roasted over a blazing fire of deadwood. While these fascinating animals were cooking, Ned prepared some bread from the artocarpus. Then the pigeon and ringdove were devoured to the bones and declared excellent. Nutmeg, on which these birds habitually gorged themselves, sweetens their flesh, and makes it delicious eating. Drink break. All right, Ned, I asked the Canadian. Now what do you need? Game with 4 paws, Professor Aronnax, Ned Land replied. All these pigeons are only appetizers, snacks. So till I've bagged an animal with cutlets, I won't be happy. No rye, Ned, till I've caught a bird of paradise. So then let's keep hunting, Council replied. But while we're heading back to the sea, we've arrived at the foothills of these mountains, and I think we'll do better if we return to the forest regions. It was good advice, and we took it. After an hour's walk, we reached a genuine sago palm forest. A few harmless snakes fled underfoot. Birds of paradise stole off at our approach, and I was in real despair of catching one when Consul, walking in the lead, stopped suddenly, gave a triumphant shout, and came back to me, carrying a magnificent bird of paradise. Oh, bravo, Council, I exclaimed. Master is too kind, Council replied. Not at all, my boy. That was a stroke of genius. You caught one of these live birds with your bare hands. And, if Master will examine it closely, he'll see that I deserve no great praise. Why not, Council? Because this bird is drunk as a lord. Drunk? Yes, Master, drunk from nutmegs it was devouring under that nutmeg tree where I caught it. See, Ned, my friend, see the monstrous results of intemperance? Damnation, the Canadian shot back. Considering the amount of gin I've had these past 2 months, you've got nothing to complain about. Meanwhile, I was examining this unusual bird. Council was not mistaken. Tipsy from that potent juice, our bird of paradise had been reduced to helplessness. It was unable to fly. It was barely able to walk. But this didn't alarm me, and I just let it sleep off its nutmeg. This bird belonged to the finest of the 8 species credited to Papua and its neighboring islands. It was a great emerald, one of the rarest birds of paradise. It measured 3 decimeters long. Its head was comparatively small, and its eyes, placed near the opening of its beak, were also small. But it offered a wonderful mixture of hues, a yellow beak, brown feet and claws, hazel wings with purple tips, pale yellow head and scruff of the neck, emerald throat, belly and chest maroon to brown. 2 strands made of a horn substance covered with down rose over its tail, which was lengthened by long, very light feathers of wonderful fineness, and they completed the costume of this marvelous bird that the islanders have poetically named the Sunbird. How I wished I could take this superb bird of paradise back to Paris to make a gift of it to the zoo at the Botanical Gardens, which doesn't own a single live specimen. So it must be a rarity or something? The Canadian asked, in the tone of a hunter who, from the viewpoint of his art, gives the game a pretty low rating. A great rarity, my gallant comrade, and above all, very hard to capture alive. And even after they're dead, there's still a major market for these birds. So the natives have figured out how to create fake ones, like people create fake pearls or diamonds. What? Council exclaimed. They make counterfeit birds of paradise? Yes, Council. And how was Master familiar with how the islanders go about it? Perfectly familiar. During the easterly monsoon season, birds of paradise lose the magnificent feathers around their tails that naturalists call below the wing feathers. These feathers are gathered by the fowl foragers and skillfully fitted onto some poor previously mutilated parakeet. Then they paint over the suture, varnish the bird, and ship the fruits of their unique laborers to museums and collectors in Europe. Good enough, Ned Land put in. If it isn't the right bird, it's still the right feathers, and so long as the merchandise isn't meant to be eaten, I see no harm. But if my desires were fulfilled by the capture of this bird of paradise, those of our Canadian huntsmen remained unsatisfied. Luckily, near 2 o'clock, Ned Land brought down a magnificent wild pig of the type the natives call bari otang. This animal came in the nick of time for us to bag some real quadruped meat, and it was warmly welcomed. Ned Land proved himself quite gloriously with his gunshot. Hit by an electric bullet, the pig dropped dead on the spot. The Canadian properly skinned and cleaned it, after removing half a dozen cutlets, destined to serve as the grilled meat course of our evening meal. Then the hunt was on again, and once more would be marked by the exploits of Ned and Council. In essence, beating the bushes, The two friends flushed a herd of kangaroos that fled by bounding away on their elastic paws. But the animals didn't flee so swiftly that our electric capsules wouldn't catch up with them. "Oh, Professor," shouted Ned Land, whose hunting fever had gone to his brain. "What excellent game, especially in a stew! What a supply for the Nautilus! 2, 3, 5 down! And just think of how we'll devour all this meat ourselves while those numbskulls on board won't get a shred." In his uncontrollable glee, I think the Canadian might have slaughtered the whole horde if he hadn't been so busy talking. But he was content with a dozen of these fascinating marsupials, which make up the first order of aplacental... yeah, I think I said that right. Mammals, as Council just had to tell us. These animals were small in stature. They were a species of those rabbit kangaroos that usually dwell in the hollows of trees and are tremendously fast. Although of moderate dimensions, they'll at least furnish a meat that's highly prized. We were thoroughly satisfied with the results of our hunting. A gleeful Ned proposed that we return the next day to this magic island, which he planned to depopulate of every edible quadruped. But he was reckoning without events. By 6 o'clock in the evening, we were back on the beach. The skiff was aground in its usual place. The Nautilus, looking like a long reef, emerged from the waves 2 miles offshore. I'm gonna just finish this now. I'm very sorry for the mouth noises I always make. Alrighty. Without further ado, Ned Land got down to the important business of dinner. He came wonderfully to terms with its entire cooking. Grilling over the coals, those cutlets from the barrio tang soon gave off a succulent aroma that perfumed the air. But I catch myself following in the Canadian's footsteps. Look at me, in ecstasy over freshly grilled pork. Please grant me a pardon, as I've already granted one to Mr. Land on the same grounds. In short, dinner was excellent. 2 ringdoves rounded out this extraordinary menu. Sago pasta, bread from the artocarpus, mangoes, half a dozen pineapples, and the fermented liquor from certain coconuts heightened our glee. I suspect that my 2 fine companions weren't quite as clear-headed as one could wish. "What if we don't return to the Nautilus this evening?" Council asked. "What if we never return to it?" Ned Land added. Then a stone whizzed towards us, landed at our feet, and cut short the harpooner's proposition. And that's the end of chapter 21. I wonder what that was. I just realized I'm still on my starting soon screen. Oh my gosh. Hi y'all. This is a screen I should have been on this whole time. At least I had my face cam on. I don't know. I don't... when I'm reading, I'm tabbed to a different screen, and since I only have the one screen from my laptop, we get what we can get. Also, I don't know if you saw that one person who was like that one bot, I believe it was, who was trying to sell subs and stuff. I deleted it. Don't worry about it. I got you. And by you, I mean I got myself, but as the viewers, I got you as well. Before I start on to the next thing, I'm going to, the next chapter, I'm going to start on my chalky muffin. Because as much as I like whoopie pies, this whoopie pie is not the best, and this muffin is new. As in made today, fresh. Yes. Yes. Alrighty then. I like it. Very difficult to do a reading stream while I'm eating, but whatever. Just so you guys know, I'm not going to like read and eat at the same time, but I'm just going to be eating this whole time. If that makes sense. How have y'all been, by the way? I'm gonna go to IKEA with my mom on Friday. She's never been to IKEA before, so that's exciting. I don't think most people get excited about a trip to IKEA, but I do. This is a damn good muffin. Alrighty. Damn, this muffin's really good. Okay, I'm gonna stop eating it so I can continue reading. Chapter 22. The Lightning Bolts of Captain Nemo. Without standing up, we stared in the direction of the forest, my hand stopping halfway to my mouth. Ned Land's completing its assignment. Stones don't fall from the sky, Council said, or else they deserve to be called meteorites. A second well-polished stone removed a tasty ringdove leg from Council's hand, giving still greater relevance to his observation. We all three stood up, rifles to our shoulders, ready to answer any attack. Apes, maybe? Ned Land exclaimed. Nearly, Council replied. Savages. Head for the skiff, I said, moving toward the sea. Indeed, it was essential to beat a retreat because some 20 natives, armed with bows and slings, appeared barely 100 paces off, on the outskirts of a thicket that masked the horizon to our right. The skiff was aground 10 fathoms away from us. The natives approached without running, but they favored us with a show of the greatest hostility. It was raining stones and arrows. Ned Land was unwilling to leave his provisions behind, and despite the impending danger, he clutched his pig on one side, his kangaroos on the other, and scampered off with respectable speed. In 2 minutes we were on the strand. Loading provisions and weapons into the skiff, pushing it to sea, and positioning its 2 oars were the work of an instant. We hadn't gone 2 cable lengths when 100 savages, howling and gesticulating, entered the water up to their waists. I looked to see if their appearance might draw some of the Nautilus's men onto the platform. But no. Lying well out, that enormous machine still seemed completely deserted. 20 minutes later, we boarded the ship. The hatches were open. After mooring the skiff, we re-entered the Nautilus's interior. I went below to the lounge, from which some chords were wafting. Captain Nemo was there, leaning over the organ, deep in a musical trance. Captain, I said to him. He didn't hear me. Captain, I went on, touching him with my hand. He trembled, and turning around, Ah, it's you, Professor, he said to me. Well, did you have a happy hunt? Was your herb gathering a success? Yes, Captain, I replied, but unfortunately we've brought back a horde of bipeds whose proximity worries me. What sort of bipeds? Savages. Savages, Captain Nemo replied in an ironic tone. You set foot on one of the shores of the globe, Professor, and you are surprised to find savages there? Where aren't there savages? And besides, are they any worse than men elsewhere, these people you call savages? But, Captain, speaking for myself, sir, I've encountered them everywhere. Well then, I replied, if you don't want to welcome them aboard the Nautilus, you'd better take some precautions. Easy, Professor, no cause for alarm. But there are a large number of these natives. What's your count? At least 100. Professor Aronnax, replied Captain Nemo, whose fingers took their places again on the organ keys. If every islander in Papua were to gather on that beach, the Nautilus would still have nothing to fear from their attacks. The captain's fingers then ran over the instrument's keyboard, and I noticed that he touched only its black keys, which gave his melodies a basically Scottish color. Soon he had forgotten my presence and was lost in a reverie that I no longer tried to dispel. I climbed onto the platform. Night had already fallen, because in this low latitude the sun sets quickly without any twilight. I could see the Guebora Island, lit only dimly. But numerous fires had been kindled on the beach, attesting that the natives had no thoughts of leaving it. For several hours I was left to myself, sometimes musing on the islanders, but no longer fearing them because the captain's unflappable confidence had won me over, and sometimes forgetting them to marvel at the splendors of this tropical night. My memories took a wing toward France, in the wake of those zodiacal stars twinkle over it in a few hours. Let me start at the beginning of this sentence. My memories took wing toward France, in the wake of those zodiacal stars due to twinkle over it in a few hours. The moon shone in the midst of the constellations at their zenith. I then remembered that this loyal, good-natured satellite would return to the same place the day after tomorrow, to raise the tide and tear the Nautilus from its coral bed. Near midnight, seeing that all was quiet over the darkened waves, as well as under the waterside trees, I repaired to my cabin and fell into a peaceful sleep. The night passed without mishap. No doubt the Papuans had been frightened off by the mere sight of this monster aground in the bay, because our hatches stayed open, offering easy access to the Nautilus's interior. At 6 o'clock in the morning, January 8th, I don't know why I said 6, I climbed onto the platform. The morning shadows were lifting. The island was soon on view through dissolving mists, first its beaches, then its summits. The islanders were still there, in greater numbers than the day before, perhaps 500 or 600 of them. Taking advantage of the low tide, some of them had moved forward over the heads of coral to within 2 cable lengths of the Nautilus. I could easily distinguish them. They were obviously true Papuans, men of fine stock, athletic in build, forehead high and broad, nose large but not flat, teeth white. Their woolly red-tinted hair was in sharp contrast to their bodies, which were black and glistening like those of the Nubians. Beneath their pierced, distended earlobes there dangled some strings of beads made from bone. Generally, they were naked. I noted some women among them, dressed from hip to knee in grass skirts held up by belts made of vegetation. Some of the chieftains adorned their necks with crescents and with necklaces made from beads of red and white glass. Armored with bows, arrows, and shields, nearly all of them carried from their shoulders a sort of net, which had those polished stones their slings hurl with such dexterity. One of these chieftains came fairly close to the Nautilus, examining it with care. He must have been of high rank, because he paraded in a mat of banana leaves that had ragged edges and was accented with bright colors. I could have easily picked off this islander, but he stood at such close range. Not but. But I thought it best to wait for a show of hostility. Between Europeans and savages, it's acceptable for Europeans to shoot back but not to attack first. This book is old. I doubt I need to do a disclaimer because I've done them at the start of all my other ones, but this book was written, I think in 1860, I'm not exactly sure. Obviously, some of the stuff in it is outdated, like continuously calling the people who live on these islands savages. But I don't want to edit the original work that much as I'm reading it, or at least the translated work, because I think that's bad form. But yeah, just a little bit of a disclaimer / warning. During this whole time of low tide, the islanders lurked near the Nautilus, but they weren't boisterous. I often heard them repeat the word "asai," and from their gestures I understood they were inviting me to go ashore, an invitation I declined. So the skiff didn't leave shipside that day, much to the displeasure of Mr. Land, who couldn't complete his provisions. The Canadian spent his time preparing the meat and flour products he had brought from the Guebora Island. As for the natives, they went back to shore near 11 o'clock in the morning, when the heads of coral began to disappear under the waves of the rising tide. But I saw their numbers swell considerably on the beach. It was likely they had come from neighboring islands, or from the mainland of Papua proper. However, I didn't see one local dugout canoe. Having nothing better to do, I decided to drudge these beautiful clear waters, which exhibited a profusion of shells, zoophytes, and open sea plants. Besides, it was the last day the Nautilus would spend in these waterways, if tomorrow it still floated off to the open sea as Captain Nemo had promised. So I summoned Council, who brought me a small, light dragnet similar to those used in oyster fishing. "What about those savages?" Council asked me. "With all due respect to Master, they don't strike me as very wicked." "They're cannibals, my boy." "A person can be both a cannibal and a decent man," Council replied, "just as a person can be both gluttonous and honorable. The one doesn't exclude the other. Fine, Council, and I agree that there are honorable cannibals who decently devour their prisoners. However, I'm opposed to being devoured, even in all decency, so I'll keep on my guard, especially since the Nautilus's commander seems to be taking no precautions. And now let's get to work. For 2 hours, our fishing proceeded energetically, but without bringing up any rarities. Our dragnet was filled with Midas abalone, harp shells, obelisk snails, and especially the finest hammer shells I had seen to that day. We also gathered a few sea cucumbers, some pearl oysters, and a dozen small turtles that we saved for the ship's pantry. But just when I least expected it, I laid my hands on a wonder, a natural deformity, I'd have to call it, something very seldom encountered. Council had just made a cast of the dragnet, and his gear had come back loaded with a variety of fairly ordinary seashells, when suddenly he saw me plunge my arms swiftly into the net, pull out a shelled animal, and give a conchological yell. In other words, the most piercing yell a human throat can produce. What happened to you? Council asked, fairly startled. Did you get bitten? No, my boy, but I'd gladly have sacrificed a finger for such a find. What find? This shell, I said, displaying the subject of my triumph. But that's simply an olive shell of the tent olive species, genus Oliva, order Panctinibrachia, class Gastropoda, branch Mollusca. Yes, Council. But instead of coiling from right to left, this olive shell rolls from left to right. It can't be, Council exclaimed. Yes, my boy, a left-handed shell. A left-handed shell, Council repeated, his heart pounding. Look at its spiral. Oh, you can trust me on this, Council said, taking the valuable shell in his trembling hands. But never have I felt such excitement. And there was good reason to be excited. In fact, as naturalists have ventured to observe, dextrality is a well-known law of nature. In their rotational and orbital movements, stars and their satellites go from right to left. Man uses his right hand more often than his left, and consequently his various instruments and equipment, staircases, locks, watch springs, etc., are designed to be used in a right-to-left manner. Now then, nature has generally obeyed this law in coiling her shells. They are right-handed, only with rare exceptions, and when by chance a shell's spiral is left-handed, collectors will pay its weight in gold for it. So Council and I were deep in the contemplation of our treasure, and I was solemnly promising myself to enrich the Paris Museum with it, when an ill-timed stone hurled by one of the islanders whizzed over and shattered the valuable object in Council's hands. I gave a yell of despair. Council pounced on his rifle and aimed at a savage, swinging a sling just 10 meters from him. I tried to stop him, but his shot went off and shattered a bracelet of amulets dangling from the islander's arm. Council, I shouted. Council! What? Didn't you see that this man-eater initiated the attack? A shell isn't worth a human life, I told him. Oh, the rascal, Council exclaimed. I'd rather he cracked my shoulder. Council was in dead earnest, but I didn't subscribe to his views. However, the situation had changed in only a short time, and we hadn't noticed. Now some 20 dugout canoes were surrounding the Nautilus. Hollowed from tree trunks, these dugouts were long, narrow, and well designed for speed, keeping their balance by means of 2 bamboo poles that floated on the surface of the water. They were maneuvered by skillful, half-naked paddlers, and I viewed their advance with definite alarm. It was obvious that these Papuans had already entered into relations with Europeans and knew their ships. But this long iron cylinder lying in the bay, with no masts or funnels, what were they to make of it? Nothing good, because at first they'd kept a respectful distance. However, seeing that it stayed motionless, they regained confidence little by little and tried to become more familiar with it. Now then, it was precisely this familiarity that we needed to prevent. Since our weapons made no sound when they went off, they would have only a moderate effect on these islanders, who reputedly respect nothing but noisy mechanisms. Without thunderclaps, lightning bolts would be much less frightening. Although the danger lies in the flash, not the noise. Yo, I love that line. Hold on. Without thunderclaps, lightning bolts would be much less frightening, although the danger lies in the flash, not the noise. I'm just gonna copy and paste that somewhere so that I get to look at it again later. Then, as the dugout canoes drew nearer to the Nautilus, a cloud of arrows burst over us. Fire and brimstone it's hailing, Council said, and poisoned hail, perhaps. We've got to alert Captain Nemo, I said, re-entering the hatch. I went below to the lounge. I found no one there. I ventured a knock at the door opening into the captain's stateroom. The word enter answered me. I did so and found Captain Nemo busy with calculations in which there was no shortage of X and other algebraic signs. Am I disturbing you? I said out of politeness. Correct, Professor Aronnax, the captain answered me. But I imagine you have pressing reasons for looking me up? Very pressing. Native dugout canoes are surrounding us, and in a few minutes we're sure to be assaulted by several hundred. Ah, Captain Nemo put in serenely. They've come in their dugouts? Yes, sir. Well then, closing the hatches should do the trick. Precisely, that's what I came to tell you. Nothing easier. And he pressed an electric button, transmitting an order to the crew's quarters. There, sir, all under control, he told me after a few moments. The skiff is in place, and all the hatches are closed. I don't imagine you're worried that those gentlemen will stave in the walls that shells from your frigate couldn't breach. No, Captain, but one danger still remains. What's that, sir? Tomorrow at about this time we'll need to reopen the hatches to renew the Nautilus's air. No argument, sir, since our craft breathes in the manner favored by cetaceans. Those are whales. But if these Papuans are occupying the platform at that moment, I don't see how you can prevent them from entering. Then, sir, you assume they'll board the ship? I'm certain of it. Well, sir, let them come aboard. I see no reason to prevent them. Deep down, they're just poor devils, these Papuans, and I don't want my visit to Guebora Island to cost the life of a single one of these unfortunate people. Damn. On this note, I was about to withdraw, but Captain Nemo detained me and invited me to take a seat next to him. He questioned me with interest on our excursions ashore and on our hunting, but seemed to not understand the captain's passionate craving for red meat. Then our conversation skimmed various subjects, and without being more forthcoming, Captain Nemo proved more affable. Among other things, we came to talk of the Nautilus's circumstances, aground in the same strait where the Captain Dumont de Urville had nearly miscarried. Then, pertinent to this, he was one of your great seamen, the captain told me. One of your shrewdest navigators, that de Urville. He was the Frenchman's Captain Cook, a wise man, but unlucky. Braving the ice banks of the South Pole, the coral of Oceania, the cannibals of the Pacific, only to perish wickedly in a train wreck. If that energetic man was able to think about his life in its last seconds, imagine what his final thoughts must have been. As he spoke, Captain Nemo seemed deeply moved. An emotion I felt was to his credit. Then, chart in hand, we returned the deeds of the French navigator. His voyages to circumnavigate the globe, his double attempt at the South Pole, which led to his discovery of the Adelie Coast and the Louis Philippe Peninsula. Finally, his hydrographic surveys of the chief islands in Oceania. What your de Urville did on the surface of the sea, Captain Nemo told me, I've done in the ocean's interior, but more easily and more completely than he. Constantly tossed about by hurricanes, the Zealous and the new Astrolabe couldn't compare with the Nautilus, a quiet workroom truly at rest in the midst of the waters. Even so, Captain, I said, there's one major similarity between Dumont de Urville's sloops of war and the Nautilus. What's that, sir? Like them, the Nautilus has run aground. The Nautilus is not aground, sir, Captain Nemo replied icily. The Nautilus was built to rest on the ocean floor, and I don't need to undertake the arduous labors, the maneuvers de Urville had to attempt in order to float off his sloops of war. The Zealous and the new Astrolabe well nigh perished, but my Nautilus is in no danger. Tomorrow, on the day stated and at the hour stated, the tide will peacefully lift it off, and it will resume its navigating through the seas. Captain, I said, I don't doubt. Tomorrow, the captain added, standing up. Tomorrow at 2:40 in the afternoon, the Nautilus will float off and exit the Torres Strait undamaged. Pronouncing these words in an extremely sharp tone, Captain Nemo gave me a curt bow. This was my dismissal, and I re-entered my stateroom. There I found Council, who wanted to know the upshot of my interview with the captain. "My boy," I replied, "when I expressed the belief that these Papuan natives were a threat to his Nautilus, the captain answered me with great irony. So I've just one thing to say to you. Have faith in him and sleep in peace." "You have no need for my services?" "No, my friend." "What's Ned Land up to?" "Begging master's indulgence," Council replied, "but our friend Ned is concocting a kangaroo pie that will be the 8th wonder." I was left to myself. I went to bed but slept pretty poorly. I kept hearing noises from the natives who were stamping on the platform and letting out deafening yells. The night passed in this way, without the crew ever emerging from their usual inertia. They were no more disturbed by the presence of these man-eaters than soldiers in an armored fortress are troubled by ants running over the armor plate. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. The hatches weren't open. So the air inside hadn't been renewed, but the air tanks were kept full for any eventuality, and would function appropriately to shoot a few cubic meters of oxygen into the Nautilus's thin atmosphere. I worked in my stateroom until noon without seeing Captain Nemo even for an instant. Nobody on board seemed to be making any preparations for departure. I still waited for a while, then I made my way up to the main lounge. Its timepiece marked 2:30. Hold on, sorry, I just realized he said he worked in his stateroom until noon. Man has been stuck on a boat in the water for a very long time. He doesn't have any work. What has he been doing since 6 a.m.? 6 hours, what has he been working on? Anyway, I still waited for a while, then I made my way to the main lounge. Its timepiece marked 2:30. In 10 minutes, the tide would reach its maximum elevation, and if Captain Nemo hadn't made a rash promise, the Nautilus would immediately break free. If not, many months might pass before it could leave its coral bed. But some preliminary vibrations could soon be felt over the boat's hull. I heard its plating grind against the limestone roughness of that coral base. At 2:35, Captain Nemo appeared in the lounge. "We're about to depart," he said. "Ah," I put in. "I've given orders to open the hatches." "What about the Papuans?" "What about them?" Captain Nemo replied, with a slight shrug of his shoulders. "Won't they come inside the Nautilus?" "How will they manage that?" "By jumping down the hatches you're about to open." "Professor Aronnax," Captain Nemo replied serenely, "the Nautilus's hatches aren't to be entered in that fashion, even when they're open." I gaped at the captain. "You don't understand," he said to me. "Not in the least." "Well, come along and you'll see." I headed to the central companionway. There, very puzzled, Ned Land and Conseil watched the crewmen opening the hatches, while a frightful clamor and furious shouts resounded outside. The hatch lids fell back onto the outer plating. 20 faces appeared, but when the first islander laid hands on the companionway railing, he was flung backward by some invisible power, Lord knows what. He ran off, howling in terror and wildly prancing around. 10 of his companions followed him. All 10 met the same fate. Council was in ecstasy. Carried away by his violent instincts, Ned Land leapt up the companionway, but as soon as his hands seized the railing, he was thrown backward in his turn. "Damnation!" he exclaimed. "I've been struck by a lightning bolt." These words explained everything to me. It wasn't just a railing that led to the platform, it was a metal cable fully charged with the ship's electricity. Anyone who touched it got a fearsome shock, and such a shock would have been fatal if Captain Nemo had thrown the full current from his equipment into this conducting cable. It would honestly be said that he had stretched between himself and his assailants a network of electricity no one could clear with impunity. Meanwhile, crazed with terror, the unhinged Papuans beat a retreat. As for us, half laughing, we massaged and comforted poor Ned Land, who was swearing like one possessed. But just then, lifted off by the tide's final undulations, the Nautilus left its coral bed at exactly that 40th minute pinpointed by the captain. Its propeller churned the waves with lazy majesty. Gathering speed little by little, the ship navigated on the surface of the ocean. Safe and sound, it left behind the dangerous narrows of the Torres Strait. And there we finish chapter 22. nice. But yeah, I know for sure that I'm not going to be able to stream tomorrow. Maybe Thursday. Thursday seems cool. Not making any promises, but I did say I'm going to try to stream once a week. And when I say once a week, I mean once a calendar week. I don't mean like no cheating, where I'll just stream twice in a week and that means it doesn't count for the next, you know? I want some consistency. Especially because at the height, or at least when I first started, I was streaming like 3 to 4 times a week. And I do like it. Obviously, I don't want to be, what's the word, uninspired. But right now, I feel like the last couple streams I've done have been kind of strange. They felt kind of strange to me because since I haven't been streaming that often, there aren't that many people who come to watch, and I kind of forget how to do it. I forget how to talk. I forget what bits are, and subs, and viewers, and channel points, and all that stuff. You know what I mean. But yeah, I am probably just going to raid somebody else that I know. I don't actually no. I try not to raid when I don't have that many viewers. That's I know that it could help people potentially, but it just doesn't really feel worth it for me. Let me switch to my end screen. Thanks for watching. The next 2 chapters, I think, will mark the end of part 1 of 20,000 Leagues. It's crazy to think that it's taken me this long to read half of a book, but considering that I've never read an entire book out loud, kind of proud of myself. Oh gosh, the dog just broke in. I think that means it's time to leave, to end. Thank you, Dad. But yeah, goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you want to follow me on other social media, it's all down below. And if you aren't following me here, feel free. But I hope everyone has a wonderful night, and hopefully I will catch you again soon. Goodbye!